The night was colder than usual in New York City. Clouds hung low, and rain poured from the sky like the heavens had burst open. Streetlights flickered, and the wind whispered through the empty streets. It was past 10, and Emma Walker hurried down the sidewalk, her old jacket pulled tight. She'd just finished a long, grueling double shift at Tony's diner. Her feet ached, her hair was damp, and the city felt unusually quiet. Her old sneakers splashed through puddles as she crossed the street, her umbrella fighting a losing battle against the wind. The sound of rain hitting the pavement was the only sound for miles, a lonely melody that matched exactly how she felt inside. Emma wasn't poor, but she wasn't lucky either. Life had been a slow, uphill climb. After her parents passed away, she'd been on her own since she was 19, working hard and saving every penny she could. She dreamed of something more, a life where she didn't have to worry about rent or exhaustion. But for now, survival was her focus. As she turned the corner toward her bus stop, she noticed something unusual. Beneath a flickering streetlight, a man sat on the bus bench, hunched forward, completely drenched in rain. His clothes were soaked, and his hood hid his face, but from his posture, Emma could tell he was shivering. People hurried past, pretending not to see him. That was normal here. In a big city, kindness was a rare commodity. But Emma slowed down. Something about the man caught her attention. Maybe it was how perfectly still he was, or the quiet sadness that seemed to hang around him like the mist. She hesitated, watching him for a moment. Her heart whispered, "Help him." Her mind screamed, "Be careful." The rain grew heavier, and lightning flashed in the distance. With a sigh, Emma walked closer and said softly, "Hey, are you okay?" No answer. She stepped a little nearer. "Sir, are you all right?" Slowly the man lifted his head. His face was pale, his eyes tired but surprisingly gentle. Water dripped from his hair onto his face. He looked like someone who had been through far too much for far too long. "I'm fine," he murmured, his voice low. "Just waiting." "For a bus?" Emma asked, glancing at the schedule. She knew the last bus had left half an hour ago. He nodded, though they both knew he was lying. "You'll be waiting till morning," she said softly. "It's freezing out here." He gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. "I've been through worse." Emma bit her lip. She didn't know this man. He could be anyone. But his voice didn't sound dangerous. It sounded tired, lonely, and almost gentle. Without another word, she reached into her bag and pulled out a wrap sandwich she'd saved from work. "Here," she said. "You look hungry." He hesitated, his eyes wide with surprise. "You don't have to. Take it," she insisted. "It's just a sandwich." He slowly accepted it, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice cracking on the words. Emma smiled faintly and turned to leave, but then she heard his voice again. Softer this time, almost pleading. "Please, don't go." She stopped, the rain falling harder around them. She turned back. "Why?" she asked carefully. He looked down at the sandwich in his hands. "Because it's been a long time since someone cared." Something inside Emma shifted. In that moment, she didn't see a stranger, but a person. Someone human, broken, maybe lost. And she couldn't just leave him there. She sighed, looking at the dark clouds above. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" He shook his head. "I'll manage." She frowned. "No, you won't. You'll get sick." He gave a weak laugh. "Wouldn't be the first time?" Emma hesitated. She could already imagine her best friend scolding her for what she was thinking, but her heart wasn't listening to logic. "All right," she said finally. "You can stay at my place tonight. Just for one night, okay?" The man looked at her in disbelief. "You're serious?" "I don't make jokes in the rain," she said, forcing a small smile. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to refuse, but then his strength seemed to fade. "Thank you," he whispered. "I promise I won't cause any trouble." Emma nodded and started walking. He followed a few steps behind her, silent. As they walked through the rain, she glanced at him from time to time. He was tall, maybe in his early 30s, with a calm presence about him. There was something strangely refined about him, the way he walked, the way he spoke. that didn't match his torn clothes. They reached her small, worn brick apartment building. She unlocked the door and let him in. "It's not much," she said, placing her wet umbrella by the door. "But it's dry and warm." He looked around the tiny living room. A couch, a coffee table, a bookshelf filled with secondhand books. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like home. "It's perfect," he said softly. Emma handed him a towel. "You can use that to dry off? There's a blanket on the couch. I'll make some tea." He nodded gratefully. "You're very kind, Miss Emma," she said. "Just Emma." He smiled faintly. "I'm Ethan." As she made tea in the small kitchen, she watched him from the corner of her eye. He was quiet, polite, and strangely graceful, not like most of the people she'd seen struggling on the streets. When she handed him the cup of tea, he looked at it like it was a treasure. "No one's done something like this for me in a long time," he said. Emma smiled shyly. Maybe people just forgot how. They sat in silence for a few moments, the sound of rain filling the room. Ethan looked around, his eyes landing on a small framed picture on her table. A young girl with her parents. "Your family?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Yeah, they passed away a few years ago." "I'm sorry," he said softly. "It's okay," she replied. "I learned to keep going. That's life, right?" He nodded, looking thoughtful. "Sometimes the strongest hearts come from broken places." She glanced at him, surprised by the depth in his words. For someone who looked like he had nothing, he spoke like someone who had once had everything. As the night grew colder, Emma stood up. "You should rest," she said. "The couch is all yours." Ethan nodded. "Thank you, Emma, for everything." She smiled, pulling a blanket around him. "Just get some sleep. The storm will pass by morning." As she turned off the lights and walked to her bedroom, she glanced back one more time. Ethan sat quietly, holding the blanket, staring out the window. The rain reflected in his eyes, and for a moment she saw something there. Pain, loss, but also warmth. In her room, Emma lay awake, her mind racing. Who was he really? What had happened to him? And why did he feel so different? Her eyes grew heavy, and she finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that her simple act of kindness had set something powerful in motion. Meanwhile, in the living room, Ethan stayed awake. He pulled out a small, elegant wristwatch from his pocket, the kind that didn't belong to a man on the streets. He stared at it for a long time, then quietly whispered, "Maybe she's the one who'll make me believe again." Outside, the rain finally began to fade. Inside that small apartment, two strangers from two completely different worlds had crossed paths in the most unexpected way. Neither of them knew that this night, this single act of kindness, would change their lives. The morning light filtered through my curtains, the scent of last night's rain still hanging in the air. I stretched, my mind hazy, and then it hit me like a jolt of lightning. The stranger. I had brought a complete stranger home. My heart hammered against my ribs as I rushed into the living room, and there he was, sitting on my couch, a steaming mug of coffee in his hands. He looked up, his brown eyes surprisingly calm. "Good morning," he said, his voice soft. I just froze for a second, my brain trying to catch up. "Morning?" I managed to say. "Did you make that coffee?" He offered a shy smile. "Yeah, I found the jar in the kitchen. I'm sorry. I should have asked." A sigh escaped me, a mix of amusement and total confusion. "It's okay. I guess I've had stranger mornings." He let out this light chuckle, and it was warm, gentle. It was peaceful. I crossed my arms, trying to look in charge. "So, what should I call you?" "Ryan," he said. "Just Ryan." "Just Ryan, huh? Okay, I'm Emma." We shared a small, tentative smile. For a moment, the silence wasn't awkward. It was just quiet. I started making breakfast, cracking eggs into a pan, trying my best not to feel like I was in a weird dream. Ryan stood up, asking if he could help. "You can toast the bread," I said, handing him the loaf. He handled it so carefully, like it was a delicate antique. I couldn't help but laugh. "Relax, it's just toast, not rocket science." He smiled, a little embarrassed. "I guess I'm rusty." We sat down to eat, the simple meal feeling strangely comforting. "So," I started, "what's your story? How'd you end up sitting in the rain last night?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. I lost some things, he said quietly. My job, my direction, maybe myself. I wanted to dig deeper, but his tone held a pain he was clearly trying to hide. I just nodded. I get that. Life's been rough for me too lately. He met my eyes. You still helped me, even when you didn't have to. Most people wouldn't. I shrugged. I just couldn't walk past you. You looked like you needed someone to care. Ryan gave a faint smile. Then I'm lucky you came by. Over the next few days, Ryan stayed. It was meant to be one night, but he just fit. He fixed the wobbly hinge on my door, replaced a burnt-out light bulb, and cleaned the kitchen without a word. I'd come home from my long shift at the diner, and the apartment just felt better. One evening I joked, "You know, for someone who claims to be lost, you're surprisingly useful." He laughed softly. Guess I needed a project. More like a reason to stay busy, I teased back. He nodded slowly. Maybe both. We fell into this comfortable rhythm. I'd work, and he'd make our little apartment feel like a real home. One night we were eating pasta, the TV murmuring in the background. Ryan, I said, breaking the silence, you're different. You don't talk like someone who's been living on the street. He looked down at his plate. Maybe because I wasn't always like that. Then what happened? I asked gently. He hesitated. I just needed to disappear for a while. Disappear? I frowned. He looked up, his eyes suddenly serious. Sometimes people expect too much. They see your name, your job, your money, and forget you're human. His words felt heavy with experience. Whoever you were before, I said softly, you're safe here. I don't care about your past. He smiled, and this time it seemed real. That's what makes you different. The night grew colder, and rain began to tap against the window pane again. Ryan was on the couch, just staring out at the city lights. I brought him a blanket. You should sleep, I told him. He turned to me, his voice low. Emma, thank you. You didn't know me, but you opened your door anyway. I just shrugged, trying to act casual. I guess I just trusted my heart. He smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes I couldn't quite place. I won't forget this, he whispered. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but the moment passed. The room was quiet again, filled only with the sound of the rain. The next morning, he was gone. The blanket was folded neatly on the couch. Next to the empty coffee pot was a note. My hands trembled as I picked it up. In neat, steady handwriting, it said, Thank you, Emma. You gave me kindness when I had nothing. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. My heart just dropped. I sank onto the couch, staring at the note. The apartment suddenly felt so cold, so empty. I didn't know who Ryan really was, or why he came into my life, but I knew I would never forget the stranger who reminded me that kindness still matters. That night, I stood by the window watching the rain fall. I could almost hear his calm voice, see his soft smile. Somewhere out there in that massive city, he was walking under the same rainy sky. And I had a feeling he was thinking of me too. Little did we know, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something neither of us could run from any. A week had passed since Ryan left, but the emptiness in Emma's apartment felt heavier each day. The couch where he had slept looked too neat now, and every morning when she brewed coffee, she caught herself pouring 2 cups before realizing she was alone again. The quiet was no longer peaceful. It was hollow, a constant reminder of the gentle words he used to fill the silence. Every night she'd sit by the same window, staring at the glittering lights of New York City, listening to the traffic below. She kept asking herself the same questions. Who was he? Where did he go? And why did it feel like he had left a piece of himself behind, woven into the fabric of her quiet life? Then, one evening, everything changed. Emma was finishing her shift at the diner when her friend and coworker Lena came rushing in, her phone held out like a beacon. "Emma, look at this," she said, panting slightly. Emma took the phone, confused, and her eyes landed on a news headline flashing across the screen. Billionaire Ryan Carter found alive after mysterious disappearance. Below it, a photo showed a man standing confidently before reporters, wearing a sleek black suit. Her hand went cold. It was him, Ryan. She read the caption slowly, her breath catching in her throat. CEO of Carter Industries returns after going missing for months. Her heart pounded in her chest. The same man who had eaten soup in her kitchen, who had slept on her couch, who had said he'd lost everything, was one of the richest men in the country. Lena frowned, seeing the color drain from her face. "You okay, Em? You look like you just saw a ghost." Emma forced a weak smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. I just need some air." She handed the phone back and walked out into the cool night. The diner's neon sign flickered behind her as she stood there, her thoughts spinning into a tangled mess. It all started to make sense now. The way he spoke, his calm demeanor, the way he fixed things with an effortless confidence, like he'd been trained to lead. He wasn't a lost man at all. He was hiding. But why? Emma walked home slowly that night, the city lights blurring through her tears. She felt angry, confused, and yet strangely proud. She had seen him not as a billionaire, but as a person. And maybe, just maybe, that's why he had come to her in the first place. Days passed, but Emma couldn't escape the truth. Every time she turned on the TV or scrolled through her phone, there he was, Ryan Carter, smiling for cameras, giving interviews, thanking the world for its concern. He never mentioned her, of course. How could he? She was just a stranger who had given him shelter when he had nothing. Still, a small, stubborn part of her wished he would. Then one night, as she was locking up the diner, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the misty air. She tried to ignore it, but the car door opened, and he stepped out. Ryan. He wasn't in a suit this time, just a dark coat. But even in the dim light, he looked different. Stronger, calmer, yet his eyes still carried that same gentle warmth she remembered. Emma froze, the keys dangling from her hand. The air around them felt heavy, charged with unspoken words. He walked toward her slowly. "Hi, Emma." Her voice was barely a whisper. You're really him." He nodded. "Yes, I am." They stood in silence for a few long seconds, the streetlight above them flickering softly. "You lied to me," Emma finally said, her voice laced with hurt. Ryan's shoulders lowered. "I didn't mean to lie. I just wanted to escape for a while. I wanted to see what the world looked like when people didn't know my name." Emma crossed her arms, a wall going up around her heart. "And you thought pretending to be homeless was the answer?" "I didn't pretend," he said quietly, his gaze earnest. "When I left my company, I really had nothing with me. I walked away from everything. I wanted to know if kindness still existed in the world." She stared at him, the city's sounds fading into the background. "And you found it in me?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, you didn't look at me with pity. You looked at me with care. You reminded me what it means to feel human again." Her anger began to melt away, replaced by a deep, confusing ache. "Then why did you leave without a word?" Ryan took a step closer, his expression pained. "Because when they found me, my family, my company, the media, I didn't want you caught in it. I thought disappearing again would protect you." "Protect me?" she said softly. "From what? Your truth?" He didn't answer at first. Then he whispered, "From the storm that follows me." Emma looked down, fresh tears stinging her eyes. "You could have trusted me." Ryan's voice broke slightly. "I do trust you. That's why I came back." He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small, folded note, the same one she'd left for him on the coffee table. But now, there was something new written below her words. It said, "You gave me kindness when I had nothing. Now I want to give you honesty when I have everything." Emma's hands trembled as she read it. She looked up, meeting his gaze as he continued softly, "You didn't fall in love with the CEO. You fell in love with a broken man trying to find himself, and that man is still me." Her heart twisted at his words. "I didn't fall in love," she said, though her shaking voice betrayed her. Ryan smiled faintly, a knowing, gentle smile. "Then tell me why you kept my blanket on the couch." She opened her mouth but had no reply. He was right. The street was quiet, wrapped in the night's embrace. Ryan looked at her for a long moment, then said, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to tell you the truth with my own voice." Emma's eyes softened. "And what are you going to do now? Go back to your rich life and forget about this?" He shook his head. "No, because everything I searched for, I already found that night in the rain." Her chest ached with a mix of hope and fear. She wanted to believe him, but her trust was a fragile thing. Ryan took another step closer, his voice low and steady. "I'll prove that I meant every word, but I'll do it slowly, the way you helped me heal. One day at a time." Emma looked into his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a billionaire. They were the same eyes that had once looked lost and kind under the streetlight. She finally said, her voice barely audible, "I don't know if I can trust you again." Ryan nodded, accepting her words. "Then let me earn it." He turned to leave, but stopped halfway. "You once told me you trusted your heart that night. Do it again, Emma. Just once more." She watched him walk away, disappearing into the same mist he had once come from, her heart torn between anger and a deep, undeniable longing. When she finally looked down at the note in her hand, a small smile broke through her tears. Maybe some truths were worth forgiving. That night, as she sat by her window again, the city lights danced on the wet streets. The rain had started falling softly, just like the first night. She closed her eyes and whispered to the city, "Ryan Carter, the man who taught me that not all riches are made of gold." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, and somewhere in that vast city, Ryan looked up at the same rain, thinking of her. The truth was no longer a secret. It was the bridge between them, and destiny, it seemed, wasn't done with them yet. The following week felt like a storm brewing quietly inside Emma's heart. Ryan was back, and her world was spinning. Everywhere she went, whether it was the diner, her small apartment, or the park, his words followed her like a shadow. "You once trusted your heart that night. Do it again." She tried so hard to push him away, to tell herself it was over, but it was no use. Every cup of coffee she poured, every single drop of rain that hit her window pane, brought his memory rushing back. She kept telling herself she was just an ordinary woman, a waitress. He was Ryan Carter, a billionaire CEO. They lived in two completely different worlds, two separate lives that were never meant to cross again. But fate, as it turns out, had a twisted sense of humor. 3 days later, Emma was in the middle of a busy lunch rush at the diner when a sleek black car pulled up outside. Now, fancy cars weren't exactly a rare sight in this part of town, but this one made her heart skip a beat. The door opened, and a tall man in a sharp suit stepped out. It was Mr. Blake, Ryan's personal assistant. He walked straight into the diner, his calm, professional voice cutting right through the noisy chatter. "Excuse me, are you Miss Emma Brooks?" Every single person in the diner stopped what they were doing and turned to stare. Emma froze, a tray of food balanced precariously in her hands. "Yes, that's me," she managed to whisper. Mr. Blake approached her table and handed her a crisp white envelope, sealed with the unmistakable Carter Industries logo. "Mr. Carter asked me to deliver this to you personally." And just like that, before she could even form a question, he turned on his heel and was gone. The diner instantly erupted into a chorus of whispers, but Emma couldn't hear any of it. Her hands were trembling as she broke the seal and opened the envelope. Inside, there was a single elegantly written letter. It read, "Emma, I owe you more than words. Come to the Carter Foundation Gala this Friday. You deserve to know the full truth." And it was signed, simply, Ryan. Her mind went into overdrive. A gala? The Carter Foundation Gala? That was one of the biggest, most exclusive charity events in the entire city. It was broadcast live, attended by hundreds of high-profile, wealthy elites. She couldn't go to that. She wasn't ready for that world. But then, a small, quiet voice deep inside her whispered, "You need to go." Friday arrived in a blur. Emma stood in front of her bedroom mirror, nervously adjusting a simple blue dress she'd borrowed from her friend Lena. It wasn't a designer gown, not by a long shot, but it fit her well, and it made her feel confident. Her heart was pounding like a drum against her ribs as the taxi pulled up to the grand hotel where the gala was being held. The entrance was a dazzling spectacle of sparkling lights, flashing cameras, and a sea of reporters shouting questions. She hesitated, feeling completely and utterly out of place among the glamorous crowd, draped in glitter and diamonds. And then she heard it, a familiar voice calling her name from behind. Emma? She turned around, and there he was, Ryan Carter, standing just a few feet away, looking absolutely breathtaking in a classic black tuxedo. For a split second, the noise, the lights, the entire world around them just disappeared. It was only him. Ryan offered a soft, gentle smile. You came. Emma crossed her arms, a shield against the whirlwind of emotions churning inside her. I wasn't sure I should. He nodded, his expression understanding. I know. But I promised you honesty, and tonight, you'll have it. He offered her his arm, and after a long, silent pause, she took it. As they walked into the grand ballroom together, it felt like hundreds of pairs of eyes turned to watch them. Emma felt small, invisible, a ghost among the city's rich and powerful. But with Ryan's hand securely on her arm, she felt a quiet courage she didn't know she had. The host took the stage, speaking about kindness, compassion, and the importance of giving back. Then, Ryan was called up next. The ballroom filled with loud applause as he made his way to the podium. Emma stood in the audience, her heart in her throat, with absolutely no idea what he was about to do. Ryan began his speech. Months ago, I disappeared, he started, his voice resonating through the hall. Everyone thought I ran away from my company, from my life. But the truth is, I was lost, both inside and out. He paused, and his eyes scanned the crowd until they found hers. I walked the streets with nothing but the clothes on my back. I wanted to see the world without my name, without my money. And that's when I met someone who changed everything. The entire audience went completely silent. He continued, his voice steady but thick with emotion. She didn't know who I was. She didn't care. She gave me food, a place to stay, and something I hadn't felt in years. Genuine kindness. Because of her, I learned what it means to be human again. Gasps rippled through the room as Ryan turned, his gaze fixed on Emma. She's here tonight. In that instant, a bright spotlight swung across the room and landed directly on her. Emma froze, her world tilting on its axis. Everyone turned. Cameras flashed relentlessly, and whispers erupted all around her. Her heart was beating so fast it actually hurt. Ryan gave her a gentle, reassuring smile. Emma Brooks, you didn't just help a stranger, you helped me find myself again. The room erupted in applause. Some people even rose to their feet for a standing ovation, but Emma wasn't paying attention to any of them. Her eyes were locked on Ryan's. He walked down from the stage and stopped right in front of her. I owe you everything, he said softly, his voice low enough so only she could hear. But what I really want is a chance to make things right. Emma felt her throat tighten, the words catching. Ryan, this is too much. You didn't have to do all this. He smiled. Maybe I didn't. But I wanted the world to know what real kindness looks like. Just then, the orchestra began to play a soft, slow melody. Ryan extended his hand. Dance with me? Emma hesitated for only a moment, then gave a small nod. As they moved together to the rhythm of the music, the crowd, the lights, the entire world just faded away. It was just the two of them again, just like that first night, in the pouring rain. He leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear as he whispered, I never forgot you, Emma. In every meeting, behind every headline, every single moment, I was thinking of you. Tears welled up in her eyes, glistening under the chandeliers. You lied to me once, Ryan. How do I know any of this is real? He looked directly into her eyes, his gaze unwavering. Because this time, he said quietly, I have nothing left to hide. When the song ended, the applause brought them back to reality. Emma took a small step back, her mind still reeling, still so unsure. Ryan smiled, but he didn't push her. No pressure, just time. Let me earn your trust back. She gave a soft, hesitant nod. We'll see. He smiled back, a wave of pure relief washing over his face. That's all I need. The rest of the night was a blur of flashing cameras, polite laughter, and the soft glow of 1,000 lights. But for Emma, the only thing that was crystal clear was the way Ryan looked at her, with the very same eyes that had once pleaded for help in the rain. Later, as she rode home in a taxi, Emma watched the city lights streak past the window. She caught a glimpse of her reflection and saw the faint outline of a smile. She had no idea what the future held, but a feeling deep in her gut told her this wasn't the end of their story. It was a new beginning, because sometimes love truly begins where the truth finally finds the courage to speak. A week had passed since the gala, but Emma still felt like she was living in a dream. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. Customers at the diner smiled and whispered, "That's the girl who helped the billionaire." She didn't like the attention, but deep down, she couldn't deny that her life had changed in a way she never expected. Still, fame wasn't what she wanted. What she truly craved was clarity. And maybe, just maybe, a future with Ryan. But he hadn't called. Not a single time since that magical night. Every evening she found herself back at her window, just like before, watching the city lights flicker across the rain-slicked streets. The rain had returned that week, soft and endless, a perfect mirror for the thoughts swirling in her mind. Maybe it was all just a moment, she whispered to the empty room. A beautiful, impossible moment that was never meant to last. One afternoon, as Emma was leaving work, something unusual caught her eye. Across the street, in the window of a small flower shop, was a single white rose in a simple glass vase. Beside it, a tiny card. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she crossed the street to get a closer look. The card's message was simple, yet it made her heart skip a beat. "For the girl who made me believe again." She instinctively turned the card over, and there it was. His name. Ryan. Before she could even begin to process the flood of emotions, a familiar voice spoke from just behind her. "Do you still like white roses?" Emma spun around, her heart pounding in her chest. And there he was, standing in the rain again, without an umbrella, his hair already soaked, just like the first time they met. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Ryan?" He offered a soft, almost hesitant smile. "I thought I'd wait here until you forgave me for disappearing." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The gentle rain fell between them, a cool curtain separating two worlds. Emma wanted to be angry, to demand an explanation for the week of silence, but the sight of him, drenched, sincere, and so incredibly hopeful, chipped away at her defenses. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "Because you changed me, Emma. That night, you didn't just give me shelter from the rain. You gave me a sense of peace I didn't know I was missing. And I've realized I don't want a life that doesn't have you in it." She shook her head slightly, the reality of their situation crashing back down. "Ryan, our worlds are too different. You belong up there, in your glass towers, and I belong here, on these streets." He interrupted softly, his gaze locked on hers. "Then I'll come down. I'll come down to you, every single time." Her eyes glistened, a mix of rain and unshed tears. "You don't have to prove anything to me." He smiled faintly. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm keeping a promise I made to myself." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small silver key. "I bought the old bookstore next to your diner," he said quietly. "I'm turning it into a community cafe, a place for everyone. No rich, no poor. Just people." Emma blinked, completely stunned. You did that?" He nodded, his expression earnest. "Because you once told me that kindness should never depend on how much money someone has. You were right. I don't want to just bring you into my world, Emma. I want to build something with you. In yours." Her lips trembled as she whispered his name. "Ryan." He stepped even closer, the rain dripping from his hair onto his shoulders. "Emma Brooks, you were the only person who ever saw me for who I am, not for what I own. I'm not asking you to believe in me again. I'm asking you to believe in us." Tears finally spilled from her eyes, tracing paths down her cheeks. "And if I say yes?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. Ryan's smile widened, lighting up his face. "Then I promise you I'll never walk away again. Not as a stranger, not as a secret, but as the man who loves you." Emma's heart felt heavy and light all at once. The rain blurred the world around them. The passing cars, the city noise, the distant lights. All she could see was him. Slowly, she reached out her hand. "Then don't make me wait again." Ryan took her hand gently, his fingers surprisingly warm despite the cold rain. For a moment, they just stood there, smiling at each other through tears. Then, without another word, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss. It was real, honest, and filled with all the words they hadn't said. The world seemed to fade away. The sound of distant thunder, the glow of the city lights turning into a backdrop of stars. When they finally pulled apart, he whispered, "You once gave a stranger a home for a night. Now let me give you forever." Emma laughed through her tears, a sound of pure joy. "Forever sounds nice, but you're still making coffee in my kitchen." He chuckled, his eyes sparkling. "Deal." They started walking together down the quiet street, hand in hand, the rain tapping a gentle rhythm on their coats. For the first time, Emma wasn't walking alone, and Ryan wasn't running from anything. They had both found what they were searching for. Not wealth, not fame, but love. Simple, real, and unconditional love. Months later, the cafe opened its doors. Its charming wooden sign read, "Second Chance Cafe, a place where kindness begins." Every morning, Ryan brewed coffee while Emma served customers with her signature bright smile. People came for the coffee, but stayed for the warmth and the feeling of community. Sometimes, when it rained, they'd sit together by the large front window, watching the world outside. And every time the first drop fell, Ryan would turn to her with that same loving smile and say, "That night started it all." Emma would nod, her eyes shining with a happiness she once thought was impossible. The rainy night that changed everything. Love doesn't always start with a perfect moment. It often begins with a simple act of kindness, a small choice, a helping hand, a heart brave enough to care. And sometimes that's all it takes to turn a stranger into the love of your life. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more content just like this. See you next time.